Welcome back, listeners and even viewers to the Arcade Attack podcast. We've got another super guest on today's show, a true LucasArts and Monkey Island legend. It really is an honor to have Tami Borowick on the show today. Tami, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
No, it really is. The pleasure's all ours, trust me. And a lot of our listeners and viewers, I know, are huge Monkey Island and LucasArts fans, and we couldn't ask for a better guest. So can't wait to ask you all the questions, actually. Before we get talking about LucasArts and especially Monkey Island, I'd love to know, actually, how did you first get into the video game industry? What was your sort of pathway?
Well, I didn't do, I didn't play video games when I was growing up. I mean, I played Pong a little bit, but my family didn't own one. So I had to go to somebody's house, and the only person I knew who had it was a babysitter. So I got to do that, but it wasn't like really part of my life. And even as I was going into high school and college, I really wasn't playing games, and my friends weren't playing games. So I wound up getting into the games industry through Lucasfilm, and it was purely by chance. I was very lucky. I was about to graduate college, and I went to the Career Center, and they had a letter from Lucasfilm saying that they were looking for interns. And recently, somebody had written in our alumni magazine, alumni because it's a women's college, and the letter was written by somebody who worked at Lucasfilm and was talking about what an interesting place it was to work at. And I thought, oh, that would be interesting. My major was communication with computer science. So I actually thought I was going to be doing PR, advertising, marketing, something like that, and just use computers for writing on and, I don't know, maybe broadcast. I wasn't really sure exactly what I was going to do with it, but I knew that computers were becoming big in the world, so I needed to not be afraid of them and know how to use them. So that was what got me into the computer science, my first computer science class. And then I realized I actually really loved it. And I think I was like one class from being a full major, but my communication major needed an emphasis. So I had to pick something. So I was like, well, why not that? So I had seen this letter, and I thought, well, why don't I just send them my resume and give them a cover letter that says, I don't know if you need it, but I'm looking to do PR, advertising, or marketing. And within the week, I got back, and it was all snail mail, so this was really fast. I got back a response saying, what would you think about computer games?
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know. So I wound up on the phone with them, and I said, well, I don't really know a lot about computer games. Can you send me some?
Oh, wow.
And believe it or not, they sent me some games. They sent me 3 games. They sent me, what was it, Loom?
Oh, yeah.
Indie, the first Indie, and Zach McCracken.
Yeah.
And of course, they were for PC, but I was in education where everything was Mac. So I didn't have a computer I could play it on. So I wound up going to they used to have these stores where you could rent time on a computer. And so I wound up going to this computer store and renting time. And I remember it was $9 an hour.
Wow.
And minimum wage was like $3.25 or something like that. So it was like, oh gosh, for 1 hour, it was three hours of work. And I was a student, so I didn't work a lot. So I was like, oh gosh, but I really wanted to do it. So I went there with my games and I started playing. And my reaction was interesting. And then the reaction of the people in the room with me was interesting, because my reaction was, oh, I really like this. It's puzzles, and I like puzzles. So that really struck a chord with me. But what else struck a chord was all these other people who were in the room with me, renting their time on their own computers eventually were all standing behind me and going, oh, try this, try that, do this thing, which was really good and helpful because it actually helped me get through the games a little faster. But I was like, they're still paying for time on their machines. So I was impressed that it was interesting enough to them that they would give up their machine time and pay money to play this game that, I was the one who brought. So it was really interesting. And I was just really fortunate that I came in at the right time. I didn't know that they were looking for programmers, and the industry was just starting to talk about diversity and maybe having a different audience. And so Lucasfilm was smart enough to say, maybe we need somebody from a different audience to create a different audience.
Interesting.
So right place, right time.
What a great story. Do you still have those 3 original copies of those games, or are they long gone, do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. I might. Yeah. I don't know. I have boxes of games that sit in my closet now, which I know collectors would be mad about, but hey, they're not getting dirty. And
That's mad. I assume you couldn't complete all those 3 games in 1 hour. Did you have to keep coming back, or was it just a feel for the games at least? Or
I played a bit of each game. Well, I played a bit of the first one. I played more of the second and third just because those other people wound up coming over. So I think the first one I played was Loom, and then I went to Zach and spent the majority of time on that. Because really, I just was looking to get an idea of what the games were, not necessarily like go all the way through them.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. That's a great story, Tami. Thank you.
Sure.
What was when you got into the office? I assume you got into it was Lucasfilm game back then, wasn't it? It turned to LucasArts later, obviously. But what was the first game you properly worked on? Do you remember?
Yeah, I worked on. It's not actually a game, but I worked on Passport to Adventure, which was a 3-pack of demos. Right. And it was right after I had finished Scum U. And there were 3 Scum programmers who were in my Scum U class. There were other people as well, like Hal Barwood was in my class. Brad Taylor was in my class. I think there were some other people. Wallace Poulter was in my class. But there were 3 Scum programmers. So there was Mike Stemley, Sean Clark, Tony Shea, and me. And this demo disc, Passport to Adventure, had 3 games and then an interface. So we looked at each other and we're like, well, who's going to do what? And we weren't told. The cool thing about Lucasfilm is often you weren't told what to do. You were just like, hey, we need this thing done. So nobody wanted to do the system. Everybody wanted to work on the games. So we wound up drawing toothpicks, kind of like drawing straws, but we didn't have any straws on hand. So there was one short toothpick, and that was me.
Oh, nice.
So I got the system, which was funny because I was the one who wasn't the computer science major. I had built a compiler, and I had programmed in multiple languages and stuff like that. But I just really wasn't like a system programmer. But thankfully, it turned out it was just really, it wasn't doing the system of Scum. It was doing the system of the demo. So it was basically figuring out what the UI would be and trying to make it match what the games were at the time. So I wound up doing that, and it didn't take as long as I had thought it would. First thing you kind of go, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And so I finished early, and I was like, okay, what to do now? And everybody else was still working. The demo had Indiana Jones Lost Crusade and Loom, which were both games that were done, but it also had the Monkey Island on it,
wow,
which wasn't done. it was still in production, and we got all the source code and such that they had at the time and all the art assets, but it wasn't done. So we kind of had to figure out what to do. And that was the one that needed help. And Mike Stemley was working on that one. So I joined him, and together we kind of figured it out and made it work. And and that it was interesting because we only could use the art assets that we had, but we had to like somehow block off a section. But the only section that was set was that little dock section. And
of course, yeah.
And so it was just really like trying to pull out what we could and then create roadblocks where we could. So the thing I remember most about doing that was not writing dialogue, which I used to love to do, but it was actually the troll character. We put him on the dock and said, oh, we'll use him to block the dock. But he just didn't look menacing enough, and the dock wasn't built to kind of come in to where he was, so it looked like you had to pass him. So it was like, what do we do? So I was like, I'm just going to like throw his arms around. So I went into some of our art tools, our very primitive art tools. We use like, I was going to say,
Deluxe Paint, was it? Or
yes, thank you. Yes, I knew it started with a D. Deluxe Paint, and I was just like cut off his arms, and then I used the XY to like rotate his arms around.
Oh, no.
And I don't remember how I made him kind of appear and disappear, but that was all just like, what do we do? How do we make this work? And so that was my first foray into doing a game.
That's great. I mean, and obviously that troll character made it into the real game, didn't it? It wasn't like, yeah.
Well, he was built for the real game.
Oh, of course, yes. But you just
and then
made
I
it
had to take what he was at that time and then make it work for the demo, because we couldn't take anybody away from building the game. They were, that was the primary goal. So it was just like, use what you can.
I mean, that's what a great story. And I assume you did you fall in love with Monkey Island straight away out of that sort of just playing the demo? Was it, what was your initial impression really?
Gosh, when did I fall in love with Monkey Island? Actually, I'm actually thinking one of the games that they had sent me, and I'm trying to think which one it wasn't, but maybe I didn't get Indie. Maybe I got Maniac Mansion in that first group when I was interviewing, because I remember there being a woman character who is a main character. And I think there were actually more than one in that game. And I was really impressed with that. And so Monkey, gosh, I don't know. I was already enamored by all the games by the time I started on them. In between, I'm trying to think when this happened. I think it was after the demo and before I started a real game. Ron had said, you don't know games. Right. So you should know games. He didn't say it in a mean way. It was just, you should know games. And Lucasfilm had a huge library of games. And so he's like, just go to the library, pick out some random games and go play them. So I went to the library and I just stared at all these games. I'm like, how do I pick? They were just crazy lot of games, and some were really old and some were more new. And somebody saw me standing there and they're like, oh, you should play this one. And they pulled out a game and handed it to me. And I was like, okay. Well, it was Leisure Suit Larry.
Oh, no.
And yes. And it was Leisure Suit Larry when you still had to type in what it was that you wanted to do. So kind of like being at that computer store. When I started playing this game, the people I worked with, mostly men, started gathering around me. Type it, say it, do it. They were just, and I was trying to be very demure and, do it or try to find other ways of saying have sex in a very, I'm just out of college. I went to a women's college where we're very into feminism. I'm like, this is just not. And, I got through it. We made it to the end. But I had to figure out the puzzles. They didn't tell me the puzzles. They just told me what I should say, how to say it.
Tami, that is funny.
And thought it was funny watching me. In today's world, you couldn't do that.
No, we can laugh, but it's a bit of a naughty prank, really, isn't it? At best.
Yeah. But back then, first off, being a woman in the games industry was a bit of an oddity, especially not being in PR, advertising, or marketing, but being in a tech role. So it was there were two of us in our division who were both programmers, and so it was a bit of an oddity. And then here I was playing this highly sexualized game, and it was interesting.
Wow, that's what a great, not a great story, but an interesting story at the least. Really get you. Wow. I've got a tough question for you, Tami. I really think this could be pretty tough, but how would you kind of sum up working at Lucasfilm Games and LucasArts? I mean, you were there for a few years and you worked on some huge titles, but how would you kind of summarize your time there? We can pick apart the games a bit more individually soon, but how was your kind of feelings?
It was, it was kind of the best of times and it was the worst of times.
All right.
It was a little of both. And, I listened to interviews with other people and, everybody talks about all the good times, and they were, and it was amazing. And I mean, first off, the people, superbly talented people, so creative, so into quality, so into the games and making sure that everything was perfect. But they also came with a lot of varied backgrounds. So, for instance, Hal, he came from movies. He had been very successful in movies. And if you haven't ever watched Corvette Summer, watch Corvette Summer. It's actually, it seems like a kind of movie, but you watch it and it's like, I was just rooting for it. And it has Annie Potts and it has Mark Hamill in it.
Wow.
It's a good movie. Noah came from pinball. And if you haven't asked him questions about his pinball days, you definitely should. He has some really good stories. So there were all these people who had a lot of different varied interests and whatnot, but also just really talented. But we worked really hard. I came onto Monkey. It was my first real game. And maybe we had 8-hour days for a little bit, but very quickly those days turned to 10, 12 hours. And that was before crunch mode. When we got into crunch mode, it was like, oh, now we have to do all of that on the weekend too. And it's like, that's when you start going, I don't have enough socks and underwear because I don't have time to wash my clothes. So I went out and I stocked up on all this stuff. And, it was just, it was kind of funny. And we had a lot of fun. We did a lot of stuff that was unique to my group. So, for instance, my team did a stop motion movie.
Wow.
Tim had somehow, I think his brother, somebody had a stop motion camera. So he brought that in and we faced it toward a whiteboard. And we said, okay, anyone who wants to work at this movie can work on the movie. And we had no script or anything. It was just draw what you want to draw, but go take individual pictures of the screen and we'll see how it goes. And we worked on it, I don't know, a really long time, maybe a month or so. And what we quickly found was, as programmers, we're not really patient enough to do like frame by frame animation. So we started like, I'll take like 2 screenshots of this one, or 3 or 4. And then we'd go to the next thing, which was, really far ahead and such. And then the artist would come in and they'd be like doing very careful, okay, now the arm gently changes. And when we were done, it turned out we had like 4 or 5 seconds of movie.
Wow.
So it gave me a real appreciation for like those stop motion movies that go on. The high quality of them, obviously, but just also the patience that it takes to do these things. It's amazing. So we did that. Another whiteboard thing that we did, somebody wrote on the whiteboard, and Tim, Dave, and I shared an office, and somebody wrote on our whiteboard, "Draw Tami." And so all these people, whether they were programmers or not, started drawing me. I was kind of like the mascot. Again, remember, women at that time were kind of oddities. So, here I am. I wear earrings. I have funny hair. At the time, I had my hair off to one side. The joy of curly hair is you can do really bizarre hairstyles. So people had like all these things, and I wore big red glasses at the time. So people would have the glasses and earrings, and it was funny. There was like a Warhol of me with the quads of, me in different colors, and people just took all these different takes, and it was artists and whatnot. That was fun. We also had things like Hawaiian Day, where everybody dressed up Hawaiian, and just, one of the people at Lucasfilm, in our division, was really good at setting up activities for us to do. Alexa Urek, if you want to interview her, she was just really good at it. And she was our head receptionist, I believe, at the time, and was also the girlfriend of one of our team members. And so she was in our office all the time, and she would just be like, "We should do this." And then suddenly we were doing that, and we were all having fun. And I mean, it's kind of funny to think about now that we had something like Hawaiian Day, considering we didn't have time to wash our clothes. But maybe it wasn't quite crunch mode yet. Maybe we weren't doing the weekends yet. So we also, though, we ate dinner together all the time. Again, if you're working these long hours, somebody would bring in dinner, but we also at times would go out to dinner as a group and just get a nice Italian meal at Carlo's.
Nice.
It was really nice. It was really nice. We also would see movies together. Ron and I eventually started having what we called the Bad Movie Club, because it's easier to tell what went wrong than to tell what went right. And so we would go see these bad movies and then talk about them afterwards. Because, I mean, movies and the adventure games are kind of similar in many respects. But we hung out like a family. And so, like I said, the best of times, the worst of times, there's a lot of teasing. There was a little bit of bullying, which, again, none of that would fly in today's world. But ultimately, I mean, the division, the whole company provided lots of opportunities to learn. The company was always trying new things. Our division was always creating new tools, and new systems. And we were really, in the world of graphic adventures, we were really kind of forging a new industry. So that was really kind of cool too. But then we also, because it was Lucasfilm, we had special screenings of when movies would come out that they had worked on. We had speakers, which was really interesting. So like I got to hear Timothy Leary and Jane Goodall, which I was very excited about. We also got to go to the ILM Halloween party, which was really fun until it came to the costume contest, because basically you're competing with the costume, with the creature shop.
Yeah.
Like, you might win, but you probably won't.
What was your costume, Tami? Do you remember?
I went as a rocker girl.
Oh, nice.
So I had like a spiked collar and a blonde wig, or maybe it was a biker girl, and like a red bandana. Yeah, I only remember because there's a picture that I have of me. Dave Grossman was a TV. I forget what they were called. When the stations went off the air at night, they would do like the colored bars. And so he painted on his face the colored bars, and so he was that screen. Tim and Lex were McDonald's fries and like a hamburger or something. I can't remember what the other one was, but they were like a grouped thing. Eric Wilmunder and his wife were cave people. Cool. I mean, they were good costumes. They weren't shabby costumes. Mine was kind of shabby, but everybody else did really pretty well. They had been before, so this was my first time. So they knew what to expect, and I didn't until I went. It was like, wow.
I love Tami. Thank you so much for sharing these quite personal stories, really. And I that's what our listeners love the most, I think, about hearing the real side of things. And really is an honor to hear this, actually. Did you ever meet George Lucas? I heard that sometimes he'd done these famous sort of picnics and stuff, but were you ever involved in those, or did you ever get to meet him or any other big celebrities?
He was at the picnics, and I actually didn't get to meet him at the picnic. You had to be really careful with him and with other celebrities. When we worked on the ranch is considered an oasis for celebs to go to get away from Hollywood. So the rule on the ranch is that you don't talk to them unless they talk to you. So I did see George Lucas, and actually one day he held open the door for me, and I actually thanked him for that. I actually didn't know what he looked like before I got there. Wow. It was those days before. I feel so old. The days before social media, and I heard about people. I knew he was the Star Wars guy and all that. So I knew who he was, and I knew about his game or his products, his movies, but I didn't, I thought if I see him, I'll obviously recognize him. And so on my first day, the team took me to lunch in the main house on the ranch. And somebody at my table said, "There's George." And I was like, okay. And I scanned the room, scanned back, leaned over. Which one? And the whole table, like everybody's eyes shot toward me. What? Why are you here? What are you doing? And I was so embarrassed. After that, I knew what he looked like.
Yep.
But I didn't know most other people who came to the ranch. And so Tony, Mike, and Sean and I, we'd go out to lunch together, and Brad as well. We'd all go out to lunch together. And we'd walk down the road from the stable house where we worked to the tech building. And along that road, you'd see various people, and maybe somebody was walking in front of us. And then after that person went into one of the buildings, somebody would go, "Oh my God, I can't believe that was so-and-so." And I'd be like, really? But the one that I knew was we were eating lunch one day, and Huey Lewis and the News was at the table next to us. They were busy recording in the recording studio in the tech building. And it was pretty obvious they had been working all night. They can't talk to them, can't say anything, but I could just peek, kind of try to sneak looks. You don't want to look like you're looking. So that's my big claim to fame.
Bless you. No, that's great. Thank you. we've had some other huge LucasArts legends on the show, like David Fox, Brett Mogilewski, Noah Forstein, even James Purple-Hampton. I don't know if you know him. He was a tester.
Mm-hmm.
He went later on to make quite a few big Atari Jaguar games, and what amazing people. And I like to ask, actually, obviously they're very skilled, you include as well, but what attributes do you think you needed to be quite successful at LucasArts? And are you still friends with like some of those people mentioned or other people at LucasArts back in the day?
Yeah, well, first off, I can't think of Brett Mogilewski without calling him Egg. It's just, and it's been years since he's been that, but that is who he is to me. And, he's had a very successful career, as have all the others. And yeah, I keep in touch with all of them. I keep in touch with so many people from Lucasfilm, both professionally and personally. So I've worked with Dave Grossman, Casey Ackley, worked at Ari. Oh, shoot. And now I can't think of Ari's last name. But I worked at Ari's company. He was a tester when we were at Lucasfilm, and when I worked for him, he owned a company. Oh, wow. And obviously the people who went to Humongous with me, and they became basically family to me. With Ron, I worked with him. I was producing, I worked for a publisher of casual games, and he was making casual games. So I was a external producer for his game for my publisher. But I also, I just keep in touch with people personally. I see people randomly all the time, and obviously social media. I have so many people on my social media, so I keep in touch with what they're doing and all that. It's a small industry, and so it's, you get close to the people you work with, and like the people at Humongous, I worked with them for 10 years. So, the people who came from Lucasfilm. So it's hard to say that they weren't, they weren't family. Yeah. In terms of, you had also asked about what it takes to be successful at Lucasfilm. I think, every company says, oh, they need to be smart. They need to work well with others. I think at Lucasfilm, beyond that is diversity. I think bringing something to the table that other people don't have. I think that was really a big draw for who they chose. Obviously, creativity. You couldn't just be, about the numbers, the bits and numbers and such. Even the systems programmers, they had to be creative to build the best tools that would be easy to use, really propel us forward. And I think being a person who has a vision for what things could be. So I think there are people who, if you tell them, go make this blue, they'll go and they'll make it blue. But somebody at Lucasfilm will say, well, I could just make it blue, or I could make it blue and do all these other things. I could make it hop, and I can make it spin around, and I can make it do this and that. And I think that's a big thing, for that. And then, like I mentioned before, being able to take vague directions and just run with it. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. If you're right, Tam, we can talk a bit more about Monkey Island now, if that's all right. Really get to the bolts of it. And actually, I don't know if you noticed, I'm actually wearing my Monkey Island t-shirt.
Oh, look at that! What does it say? You fight, and then does it say something on the bottom?
Yeah, you fight like a dairy farmer.
Awesome!
Yeah, so I'm not embarrassed. It's one of my favorite games.
Still fighting.
I love it, and it's such a clever part of the game, actually. But I love Monkey Island. I have to say, I couldn't believe it. It's my first adventure game I ever played. I couldn't believe this genre even existed, and it blew my mind, actually. So I'd love to know, because you kind of filled in a few gaps, because you're working on the demo of it. You didn't work on the early part of the game, but could you kind of fill in the gaps how you worked on the game proper? What was your exact role? How did you come in?
I came in when it was finishing. So they were really very far along, though, not so far along that the demo was easy to decide how to do it. So when we finished the demo, I got put on the game just to kind of help wherever needed. So I have more credits than Tim and Dave, which is bizarre to me. Because I'm looking at my list here. I have a credit for art, a credit for testing, a credit for assistance, whatever that means. Basically, what wound up happening was Ron told me just to play the game every day, just like I was in QA. But he wanted me not looking for bugs, but looking for design issues. So every day, I think Mike also was doing it with me. So every day we played through the game, and then at the end of the day, we'd sit down in Ron's office and we'd go through our list of, I really wish it did this, and this feels awkward, and this is really hard. And there was one puzzle that was really hard for Mike, but really easy for me. So it showed me that different people think in different ways. So when you're underwater and Guybrush is underwater and there's a statue that he's attached to, and there's all these, he's attached with a rope, and there's all these weapons around him that have sharp edges. There's knives and machetes and axes and all these things, and you can't quite reach any of them. And so Mike was trying to figure out how he could get one of those weapons. And I basically just walked over, picked up the statue, and walked out.
Yeah.
It just, to me, that was just the obvious thing. And so we talked with Ron about that, and he was just surprised at the varying methods that we had used. So it was a good learning time for me, because we would tell him what we saw, and then he would say, yeah, we're not going to make that change. We don't have time for that. That's huge. That's little. That's interesting. He could cherry pick what he wanted. And it was really educational to me to see what it was that was important to him and what wasn't, and whatnot. And then the other thing that I wound up doing was toward the end of the game, it was decided, or maybe we had already shipped one version, and then I don't remember exactly the timing of it, but at some point, Monkey Island went from EGA to VGA.
Yes.
And it needed to happen really quickly. But, we only had the artists that we had. We didn't have a whole, studio of artists. We had a room of artists.
Yeah.
So basically anybody who was free got to work on the art. And I will say I am no artist. But I did my best to try to replicate what an artist might do. And the only thing I remember that I did, because I was just I'm sure it would be done really differently by an artist, I did dancing monkeys that were used. It was either in the opening or the credits. I think maybe it was the credits. I don't know. It was, and then I think they wound up eventually in Monkey 2. but and maybe an artist actually redid what I did, because all I did is they were these gray monkeys with white bellies. And so all I did was I took the white bellies and I added little outlines around their bellies of gradually getting darker gray and then the black.
Wow, okay.
So it wasn't really, no shading, no, here's a wrinkle in the monkey, or, nothing like that. It was just outlines that got bigger until it got to the main black outline.
Wow. Oh, that's really, really great. I mean, was there any like puzzles or characters or gameplay elements of Monkey Island that were discussed with you and Ron maybe that never actually appeared in the final game? Do you remember at all? Was it too far along really?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, things would kind of come and go all the time. And so basically, like, Ron would get these ideas. He'd be like, oh, we should do a cutscene here. And everybody would work on the cutscene, and the programmers would program it up. And then Ron would go, maybe keep this one part, but get rid of all that.
Oh, no.
and so you'd go and you'd get rid of all of that. And of course, when I was starting, I would just go and I would delete. And then the next day he'd come, I was thinking about it. And maybe we should have that.
Yeah.
And so things were kind of, and so I learned to comment out my code and not actually get rid of things for real. But yeah, I like in terms of individual things, I don't remember them because things were moving all the time. We were constantly updating the game, making it better. Ron was very into, I learned a lot from Ron about flow and pacing. And so, it was, you'd put something in and then he'd be like, cut this half and move on or, yeah.
Good stuff. I mean, why do you think, Tami, Monkey Island was so popular back then and still so popular today? I mean, that not just the original game, obviously the whole series itself, but it's absolutely incredible, isn't it?
It is. It's a little crazy to me. I think there's some, at the time, there were some big things like characters couldn't die and you couldn't get stuck in a linear puzzle thread. But I think there were bigger things that were going on. Like Guybrush is very relatable. Yeah. He's kind of a doofus, but he's a lovable doofus. Yeah. But aren't we all a doofus at some point? We all make mistakes. So it's, it was relatable in that way. But also the side characters, the supporting characters, there's a reason that Hollywood gives awards to them. It's because they really help pull you into the game. They're not just one-dimensional. And so we had very strong side characters. You could talk to them about non-puzzle topics. There's a rat that, there were like 3 pirates in where was it? Melee, I think. Yeah. That you could talk to them about what they were doing with this rat. And, they wanted to create a rat circus. It's like kind of like the people who were at Lucasfilm who had all these other interests. The characters had other interests. So I think that made a big difference. I think the humor made a difference. I think the games didn't take themselves too seriously. So like the King's Quest, you got in, the art was very staunch. It was very kind of flat and just like, I don't know. It just felt very tight to me. Yeah. And they didn't have jokes. Yeah. And I get that was their style and, that's fine. But in Monkey 1, you thought you died at one point by going over a cliff.
That's right.
And it made a joke about putting in, I think, disc 22 or something like that. And then it comes back. And so it's basically making fun of itself and making fun of the industry. And so I think that's a big thing. And then, of course, it's pretty. It was just a pretty game.
And amazing sound as well, amazing music as well. But yeah, it's the whole package, isn't it? Let's be honest.
It is, yeah.
How after Monkey Island, you kind of said you worked on the AGA version, but was there any before you went to Monkey Island 2? Was there any other projects you were in between at LucasArts, or was it straight into the sequel?
I did a couple of things. I worked on another demo for Monkey One. It was a contest demo.
Wow.
And it was something that I learned a lot about because I was told, just make it quick. But, don't worry about it so much. Just get it out the door. Don't spend a lot of time. Don't finesse it. And I did that. And then QA came back to me and said, you have to enter your birthday, but you can enter February 31st.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but it's supposed to be quick. And we went back and forth because I had originally asked the team whoever had told me to do this, what about making the days really work and whatnot? They're like, don't worry about it. Just get it out the door. But QA wouldn't put up with it. So I fixed it and made it so that, and then what about leap year? And, I had to program in all of that. So it was a good learning lesson that quick at Lucasfilm wasn't the same as quick elsewhere. Well, certainly wasn't the same as quick in college.
Yeah.
Though none of my projects in college were quick, but, and then the other thing I worked on was Night Shift. I did some programming on that, and that was a really fun project to work on. Just something really different from the adventure games.
Yeah.
And again, with each product I worked on, I learned more, and I would talk with the project leads, and they would close some of my bugs as can't do it or don't want to do it or whatever, and they would fix other things. And it was because we had this thing called a debug, which was a design bug. So it's something that's not really a bug, but we're storing it in the bug database so that it's not lost. But yeah, there was basically always something to do there. So there was never really a downtime.
Yeah, of course. I've got to talk about the sequel as well, LeChuck's Revenge. Obviously, at the time of recording, Ron Gilbert's last Monkey Island game. We know there's going to be another one coming out, but that's not released quite yet, obviously. But yeah. How did Monkey Island 2 come about? Was it always going to happen, the sequel? Was it always in Ron's mind he wanted a sequel? And how did you get your chance, Tami, to get involved in that? I'd love to know how the initial kind of talks went on for that game.
For Monkey 2, I wasn't involved in the talks for the game. In terms of should we do it or not? So I don't know. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how exactly it came about. But my role on it, I think, came pretty closely directly to the fact that I had worked on that Passport to Adventure and had worked on the Monkey Island, because Sean went into Indiana and he had worked on the Indiana project. So Tony also went on to Indiana and he had worked on Loom, but it made sense to kind of, you got to know the property by doing the demo. And I had, talked a lot with Ron doing the demo of, hey, is it okay if we do this? And, so I think that was really the main way, was just it was kind of just the natural progression.
Yeah. No, fair. And what was I think you're credited as both a writer and a programmer for Monkey Island 2. I'd love to know, so you were given a bit more responsibility for the sequel. Is that fair? And what did you do on the game, Tami, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, well, what didn't I do? I was the same title as Tim and Dave. So we all did the same things. Basically anything that needed coding was under our purview. And so I wrote dialogue, which, okay, that's not really coding. So, okay, I'll do the coding stuff first. We put in animations and objects and sound effects, and we then we also wrote all the dialogue in our rooms. Games today are so scripted out, and you hire a professional writer, and every sound effect is, and then there's a boom here. And, and that wasn't the way these worked. We were given a space. We would start with a brainstorm of Ron wants something here. And there would be a brainstorm with all the programmers and artists, and we'd talk about what was going to happen there and what the puzzle would be and how it would work and such. And then Ron would say, okay, this is what it's going to be. And he'd go, you and you're going to work on that.
Wow.
And then it was just up to you to make it happen. And so I would go in, I would wireframe the room, get the room hooked up to whatever it was coming from and leading to, the other rooms, put in programmer art so that I could try doing puzzles to see how it worked, what would happen and what I really needed. I would talk with the artist and animator about what exactly needed to happen from my perspective. And they go, but what about if it would, jump up and spin around? Yeah. So eventually I'd have the real animation to put in and I'd be like, oh my gosh. But then all of that needed sound effects, and I would go and at the time we were using the computer generated sound. So I would go through that library and try to figure out what I could use and where it needed to go. And then all the dialogue. So the dialogue was a huge part, and dialogue trees, and yeah.
And you scripted a lot of it. Was Ron helping out? Was it you giving a lot of freedom, or?
Well, in our rooms, we could write whatever we wanted to write. Nice. Yeah. So, but Ron had some of his own rooms and scenes. He cherry picked the key things that he wanted in a certain way. And he worked on those. He did all the programming on those. But yeah, Dave did his own rooms. Tim did his own rooms. I did my own rooms. And then we had another programmer, Brett Barrett, who had some of the rooms as well. So like Brett did the spitting contest.
That's infamous, yeah.
Yeah. And then Brett also wound up putting in all of the music cues using iMuse. Which was a huge job.
It's very advanced, wasn't it, actually? I think it was ahead of its time, if I remember correct.
Yeah, it really was. It was really amazing.
What do you recall any particular rooms or puzzles that you particularly worked on, Tami, you're most sort of really proud of in the sequel?
That I'm most proud of? Rum Rogers. I'm not sure that proud is quite the right word, but it was one that I managed to get through.
Right.
I think to some extent when we were designing the puzzle for Rum Rogers that you had to change things while he was busy. You had to swap mugs of grog while he was busy in the other room. But he needed to be doing something. We didn't want it just quiet. So he was a talker. I think that might have been based on me. And then I got assigned the room. Not really sure, but maybe. So I was assigned that room, and it was a huge amount of dialogue. Oh, yeah. And I spent about a week working on all that dialogue. And this was back in the day when we didn't have servers. And so we would merge our code about once a week. And the merge was done by hand. Wow. Somebody would go through and they'd be like, oh, this part, so-and-so did this part. Okay, that's new. And they had to do each of our code changes individually. So like Tim would put up his code, and then he'd take a disk from me and he'd be like, okay, Tami changed this, so delete all the old code. Okay, Tami did that, so delete the old code. It was crazy. But it also meant that we didn't have backups of what we did.
Oh.
And so, I mean, I'm sure Ron had backups of after we merged. I think he would take home or something. I'm sure he did something to have backups. but we didn't have backups of what we had done that week before the merge. So what was on your own computer was just lived on your computer. So I did this huge amount of dialogue for Ron Rogers and just finessed it and made it beautiful. And it was awesome. And I was really proud of it. So getting back to your proud question. And then Ron came over and was looking at something on my computer. And he's like, wow, your computer's running really slowly. Have you defragged lately? And I was like, defrag? What's defrag? Remember, I had gone to school on Mac and Unix. So you don't defrag the Unix system. Or a minivax. I guess you don't defrag a minivax, not the Unix system. But so he's like, let's just run a quick defrag. So he pulls it up and he starts it running. And then he looks, he's like, oh my God, you haven't run this like since the day you got here. I'm like, yeah. And so he's like, it's going to take forever for it to finish this. So I'm just going to quit out. So he hit the escape key.
Oh no.
Apparently defrag is not something you want to escape out of, or at least not at that time, because we got this little teeny gray box came up on my screen that said fat file destroyed. And it had one red button that said, okay.
Not even cancel, undo.
No. I mean, this was what, 1990, 91, somewhere in there. So, no, there's no undo. There's no cancel. It was just, we've destroyed your fat file now. So sorry.
Oh,
and you had to actually click that okay button, which was the most horrible thing because it's not okay. I don't want it to be okay. I lost everything. So I then had, I think, like a day before I needed to get on to the next thing to redo all of Ron Rogers. So, it's true what they say that things are faster the second time, but I didn't have time to really give him, all of his quirks and fun things and whatnot. So if you felt like his dialogue was boring, there's a reason for it. You can blame Ron.
Oh, Tami. There's probably people listening now going, I wish I could play that kind of, deluxe version, the proper version. Oh no, long gone, sadly.
Yeah, long gone, lost, and I had to rebuild my computer, and it was fun times.
I mean, Monkey Island 2, I have to say, is an absolutely astounding game. I mean, you must be very proud working on it and seeing it shipped and being so successful again. But is there a particular element of Monkey Island 2 that you think, wow, because a lot of people see it as one of the best adventure games ever made. So what are you most proud of for that particular game, Tami?
I think I'm most proud that I was able to come into an existing team and work with them on an even level and try to be as funny as them. I mean, Tim has a certain type of just polarity, and Dave is very witty, and Ron has his own sense of humor. And so, it's really, and I mean, nobody actually told me. I mean, I realized this while I was thinking about this interview, that nobody ever came up to me and said, oh, by the way, if you're working on this game, you need to make sure that your dialogue is funny. Like, nobody said that. But I, obviously needed to do that. And so I'm proud that my sense of humor somehow meshed with the others in an okay way.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a fair statement, isn't it? Because they're three legends of the industry, highly regarded, and you obviously met their match, didn't you? So Tami, good on you, definitely. Fair play. Again, a similar question, but this is for Monkey Island 2, obviously. Was there any puzzles or characters or maybe elements of the game that you wanted to put in, or even Ron or other people wanted to put in, but were never actually appeared in the final version? Can you recall anything at all?
Yeah. Not that I wanted to put in, but in our brainstorming meetings, we were talking about the cemetery.
Right, yes.
And somebody said, wouldn't it be funny if Guybrush held up his hands and all his pants fall down?
Yeah, I remember.
And, you know, me being the diversity in the room. No. Like, that's potty humor. And, like, do we really need to stoop there? And I don't want to see what's, the pixels underneath his pants. And I was just like, no, I just don't like it. It's just not, I don't think we have to go there. And so I fought really hard against it, which of course meant that Ron went, you're the one who's going to program it.
Oh, no.
I was like, okay. And I realized later that it was really smart. If you have somebody who doesn't like something, you give them the task of doing it, they will do it in a way that's not offensive to them.
Yeah.
So I made sure Guybrush wasn't naked underneath. Because there was discussion,
Was it on?
Kind of like with kilts. What do pirates wear? I don't know. So, yeah, so I worked with the artist and I made sure that there was something underneath and that it wasn't the main focus of what that scene was.
Oh, Tami, that's funny. That is funny. Do you have a particular favourite character in the Monkey Island universe? I know Guybrush is probably the obvious answer, but is there anyone else, or is it Guybrush, for example?
Well, I'm dressed like Stan today.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I should wave my arms around. So I like him as a fun diversion. He was one of my favorites. Governor Marley was...
Oh, yeah.
I think she was probably my favorite, though I have to say, as a strong female role model, her falling in love with Guybrush, the bumbling fool,
yep.
Maybe not the role model that I would have hoped, but some women like a fixer-upper, so...
Yeah. I think that's fair for Guybrush. He's got a lot of flaws to him. But lover-boy, you said earlier. Yeah. Oh, bless you. I don't suppose you know this, Tami, and even if you did, I don't suppose you can tell me, but I've got to ask. Did you ever find out or even have an inkling what the actual secret of Monkey Island might be? Or is that closely guarded by Ron Gilbert himself?
It is closely guarded by Ron. I did find out at one point, and I wrote it on a little teeny tiny scroll that I rolled up, and then I implanted it in one of my teeth. But then recently, I had to have that tooth extracted, and the dentist is now holding it ransom. So, sorry.
Wow. No,
and I
enough.
don't remember what it was because I thought, well, if I write it down, I won't have to remember.
There you go. And actually, thank you, Tami. You never know. We might find out the secret quite soon because I'm sure of course, the Monkey Island's coming back. Return of Monkey Island. It was actually announced, I think, on April Fool's Day, which is quite clever, actually, if people know the backstory. I mean, do you have? I don't suppose you're involved in that game at all, but I'd love to know what you think. And are you looking forward to it? And any ideas at all?
Well, it was announced on April Fool's, and everyone thought it was a joke, and then it was re-announced on April 4th, which is my birthday. So,
wow, that's a bit odd.
No, Ron did not do that on purpose, but yes, but I took it as a birthday gift. I'm really excited about it. I think it'll be really good. I have friends from both Lucasfilm and also from Humongous who worked on it and are working on it. And so I'm just really excited to see what they've come up with. And yeah, I think it'll be really fun.
Bless you. Yeah, and you didn't know. Did you know before, or was it all secret? Or
it was all secret.
Yeah.
It was all secret.
Fair enough. So you were at Lucasfilm Games, LucasArts, obviously, for a while. But did you work before you left? Was there any other last-minute projects or games you worked on? And are you happy to tell us kind of how you did end up leaving the company?
Sure. Yeah. So I worked for a short while on a game for Young Indiana Jones, which was led by Joe Pinney. There was going to be a TV series that was based on Young Indy, and they had recorded some of the shows. It was basically this young, handsome Indy, because, Indy always has to be handsome. He would come across random famous people and interact with them and change the course of history.
Nice.
So I don't remember all the people. I remember he met Mata Hari. I don't remember other people, but it was actually, I was really excited about it. I thought it was going to be a really good TV show, and, thus the game was going to be really interesting. And the TV show got canceled, and so we didn't make the game. But then another thing that I worked on, though, was I wound up working on Amiga conversions for Monkey Island 2. And so that was really interesting. It was working with, yet another type of computer that I didn't have experience with. And we had system programmers. I think Vince Lee did most of the system programming for that. I mean, the nice thing about SCUM is it was a portable language. And so it was able to move from system to system for many, many years. And so they moved it over, but there were differences in how it displayed colors and artwork. And then with doing that, I also was doing the language conversions for those games. So it was a lot of fun. Maybe not so fun, and maybe not so fun when I deleted everything on my computer by accident.
You kidding me?
Yeah, because the Amiga, it runs everything concurrently, and so I was almost done with everything and just creating backups onto disks. So I had punched in all of my copy star to here, and I had queued up multiples of those so that they could be done concurrently, which was really, in my mind, I was thinking they were going to be done sequentially.
That's quite smart.
And then I was like, as soon as they're done, I can delete everything on this computer and give it back. So I put that in the queue, which of course is not a queue.
Oh, no.
Thankfully, they were backups, and I also had another copy. So didn't actually lose everything, but oh my God, my heart sank.
That's how I played the games, by the way, Tami, on the Amiga, by the way. I played both the on the classic Amiga, yeah. So,
well, I hope you didn't find any major bugs that I made.
No, I loved it. Again, a bit of a personal question, but why did you leave Lucasfilm Games in the end, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was multifold. One was I really liked working with Ron and Shelley, so that was a big draw. But also, I grew up thinking I was going to be a teacher. Right. My mom was an educator, and she was a teacher, and then she became a principal. And when I told her as a child I wanted to be a teacher, she talked me out of it. Okay. And so the idea of doing games for children was very seductive to me. In fact, I was at Lucasfilm when they did a game for kids. I can't remember his name. He was, I think, like a snail. I can't think of the name of the character. Mortimer, maybe. And I wasn't on that project, which I was like, So around that same time is when Ron said, hey, we're going to go up to Seattle to start this company. And when I was in college, I had a bunch of friends who were from Seattle, and I had come to visit. And I always thought, I really would like to live there. Yeah. It seems like a really nice place. So it was kind of all of those things.
And you went on to work on many putt adventure games, to name a few, and they're popular, weren't they? They're really popular.
They were, still are.
Yeah, I think they're still going, aren't they? I mean,
yeah.
Was it a really?
They're on Steam. Anybody who wants them, they're on Steam.
There you go. Obviously, there were kind of point and click games, but aimed at a different target audience. Was it really different working on those sort of games compared to Monkey Island, or was it basically the same, but just have to sort of tone down the puzzles a little bit? I know I don't want to be patronising, but I'd like to kind of know your kind of thoughts behind it.
Yeah, no, it's we started off thinking that it would be about the same, and so we started the first Putt Putt, and I should say it's Putt Putt, Freddy Fish, Pajama Sam, Spy Fox, backyard sports, so backyard baseball, backyard football, etc. We had junior encyclopedias. We had
incredible
an educational. I'm trying to think what they were called. I can't remember what they were called, but we had a couple of educational ones. We also did Blue's Clues. So we started off thinking that it would be very similar to doing what we did at Lucasfilm. And we kind of wired up a quickie version of the first Putt Putt game, Putt Putt Joins the Parade. And we brought in a group of kids to play test. And the age range at this point, I'm not sure if it's still the same, but at this point, when we were selling on physical discs in a software store, a game store, they had the children's section set up to be 3 to 8,
right? Okay.
Which is a really wide range.
That is actually.
And so they have different abilities. They have different hand-eye coordination. You know, the younger kids don't have great hand-eye coordination. Some of them couldn't read. And so we brought in these kids, and we started immediately seeing things like they can't find the door. You know, I was looking at a run through of Monkey Island last night, and it's just a little crosshair, and it was just sitting there over the door. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. They didn't turn to arrows. They didn't do anything for you to know, like in the fortune teller's shop. How did you know that you could pan the room over? You couldn't. But so in the kids' games, we couldn't do that. We had to be much more obvious about things. And so we made like arrows over the doors and such like that. But we found that they had very short attention spans. And so these kids that we brought in, we had, I think, one that was 8, one that was 5, and one that was 3. The 8-year-old was really driven to accomplish the goal of the game. You know, must get to the parade. How do I get to the parade? And he was just so into it and just, you know, can't click on anything else, just must do this. The middle kid, they were creating their own goals. So they decided that painting Putt Putt was just the most fun in the world because you could change his color. So you had to like earn coins by using a lawnmower, you know, mowing other characters' lawns. So he would mow all these lawns so he could just sit there and just change Putt Putt's color from purple to yellow to red. And then the youngest one, well, she just clicked on random clickpoints and snotted on the screen. Oh, by the time she left, and there was this big blob on the screen. It was like, okay. But I think the biggest thing about testing with those kids was at the end of it, some of the kids actually hugged the monitor.
Oh, bless.
And that you don't get from adult games. Ah. So that was really a nice reward for all the work that we did.
Wow, what a lovely... Wow, thank you, Tami. That's really generally interesting.
You didn't think it would be?
No. I confess, you know, Monkey Island was my big interest, but you know what, Putt Putt, that is an interesting story.
Freddy is an even bigger story.
Are you happy to share that? I'd love to listen to it. If you
yeah. And this is actually the thing I'm most proud of. So I was the first project leader after Ron at Humongous. And at the time that we started the first Freddy Fish game, we were still in DOS. We were in low res. Our teams were about 20 people. We drew all of our animations on the screen, just like in Monkey Island, on the computer. And about halfway through, Ron saw a game. Forget what the name was. I want to say like Farmville No, Farmville's a different game. But it was on a farm and it had Howie Mandel as the narrator. And there was like a little frog and it was interesting. And it was colored and it was pretty. And the animations were different and it wasn't in DOS. And Ron was like, this is where we need to be.
Right.
So he pulled me aside and he's like, I think we need to change. I was like, okay, what do we need to do? And we talked about all the things we needed to do. We needed new system tools. We needed to get everybody's computer up to speed. We needed to change how, basically everything about how we did the game needed to change. But we were halfway through Freddy.
Yeah.
And we had to meet our end date. And so I got the team in this really long, empty room. We called it the bowling alley. It was just a long room. And we all sat on the floor. And I'm like, here's what's going to happen. We're going to basically rebuild this game from scratch.
Whoa.
Because, we were 32240 on the screen before we made this change. And suddenly, so we couldn't even use our coordinates weren't even the same. Everything changed. And so we decided that we were working in Windows, but we were going to release in Windows 95.
Wow. Okay.
But this was 1994.
Yeah.
So Windows wasn't done yet. So Windows is working on their product. We're working on ours. Our animation went from the computer-drawn animation to hand-drawn animation that then needed to be scanned and cleaned up and then inked and painted. And it was a huge problem. And then the animator needed to go back and fix anything that still wasn't right. And, it was all completely new. We didn't know how to do any of this. Our team size went from about 20 to about 60.
Whoa.
It was crazy. We decided that we're keeping all our same puzzles. We're keeping all our same ideas of the layouts and whatnot. But everything else changed. And so we wound up being the first Win95 game, and I think product.
Wow.
In the US. And Bill Gates actually had it playing behind him when he announced the big Win95 announcement of we're here, everybody should buy it now. He had Freddy Fish swimming behind him to show how you can use these new tools. But it was a little traumatizing. It was, after, yeah, I didn't sleep. It was crazy. By the time I did Freddy Fish 2, we had multiple leads. So instead of one person leading 60 people, we had a programmer lead, we had an art lead, we had an ink and paint lead, a click point lead. Everything had its own lead. And we had stable tools by then. Because, all the tools were being rewritten at the same time, too.
I guess when you saw it behind Bill Gates, it was worth it in a way, would you say? Well, that was incredible.
I wasn't there. We had somebody there, but I wasn't there, and they didn't take pictures. It was before the days of everybody having a camera on their phone. And so it wasn't till more recently that everything is being streamed, that, saved on the internet, that I actually finally found it and went, there it is. But I was told about it. And yeah, it was really cool. But it was difficult in that if a bug came up, we didn't know, was it our bug or was it a Windows bug? And of course, when we would tell the Microsoft people, they would say, "Oh, it's not our bug."
Right. Yeah.
So, it was a bit of a back and forth, and it was a really interesting time.
Were you guys given like early versions of Windows 95 then to work with?
Yeah, we were working with their beta version.
How cool is that?
Yeah,
that is really cool. That is really cool.
I actually wonder if we were even working with the version before the beta version. But
wow.
yeah.
I mean, how many games did you work on at Humongous Entertainment? There's a big credit list, haven't you, Tami?
Yeah. I don't, number wise, I don't know, but I was in charge of the Freddy Fish stuff for the first 3 games. I worked on the first Putt-Putts. I worked on Fatty Bear. I helped out with Pajama Sam once or twice. I did some work on, like, I was a programmer on, most of these games. The Freddy ones were the only ones that I designed and led, but the other ones I was a programmer on, and would talk with the project leads about, hey, did you know about this design thing? Because it's hard to turn off. Once you start doing it, it's really hard to turn it off.
I've got to ask, actually, it's not on my question list, Tami, so I apologize, but was there ever pressure on you or Ron at the time when he was working at Humongous Games or Entertainment, to create not a new Monkey Island per se, but a more sort of adult, back to the original LucasArts style point and click game for the more adult? Was there pressure on him at all, or do you not know the answers to that?
Do you mean to create another Monkey Island or to create other adult click and point games?
Well, yeah, a bit of both, really, I suppose. I don't think he's maybe allowed to do Monkey Island with the rights and things, but
Yeah, I think this is, me talking for him, but I think he got pressure a lot to do like the next Monkey Island and whatnot, from fans and such. To do other games, I didn't get pressure for that. I don't know if he did. But honestly, I was just really happy doing the kids stuff. It was really fun. They come with their own set of unique challenges. So
fair play. And was it hugely different environment than working at LucasArts when you reflect back on Humongous Entertainment? Was it a completely different ball game, or is there a lot of similarity? I mean, I know you work with some of the same people, to be fair, but
yeah, we worked with some of the same people. It was really different in actually a lot of ways. We were a startup, and so money was scarce. There were times when Shelley forgot to sign our paychecks. And I think it was actually maybe because there wasn't the money in the bank yet. There were times that you got your paycheck and ran to the bank, because if you weren't within the first few, you weren't going to get your paycheck.
Right.
So it was tough times. We worked off of folding tables. I remember when I first moved up here, Shelley and I went to, I don't know what it was, like some warehouse store, and just bought these, folding tables like you'd see at a church banquet or something. They're just plain and flat, and we brought in our own chairs. I didn't have a comfy chair to bring in. I had a director's chair, so that's what I brought in. And I don't know how movie directors do it. They must not sit that much, because those things, after 8 hours, nevertheless 10 or 12, because, we were on these tight deadlines, it was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We had a conference room, but we had no furniture in it, so we sat on the floor. And then eventually, as we finished games and we started having money coming in, we started getting a little bit of furniture. We would get them from companies that were going out of business.
Oh, that's clever.
So it wasn't like new furniture. It was like, like we wound up with this like beautiful conference table, and I think a few of us like looked at Ron and Shelley, were like, what? Why do we have that? Like, we're totally fine sitting on the floor. We'd rather you spend money on our paychecks, and they were like, oh, no, you don't understand. This company was going out. We got it for so cheap.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, we had just a handful of people. We didn't have, we had the people who came from Lucasfilm, but then we had a couple others. We had Dave Timoney, Dev Madan as an artist, and then eventually had a few more. There's a great picture of us that we call the Brady Bunch picture. That was the original crew working on the games. Because we were so small, everybody had to wear a lot of hats. So I remember like proofreading, the manual, or, going for like a check on the game's cover, right. Because it was boxed. So the box had a cover, and doing some sort of print check on that. We had to keep the game small because we need to hit our deadlines, because if we didn't hit our deadlines, we'd all be laid off. And we just didn't have that at Lucasfilm. And I think the biggest difference was we were able to make our own properties. And by that time, Lucasfilm, George had realized that he had a games division and had realized that they weren't just capitalizing on Star Wars. So that was the new drive there. And we got out of that and made our own stuff.
Yep. Are you a Star Wars fan, if I ask?
I've watched it. I watched the first 3, and then I watched some of the next 3, but I couldn't tell you which ones.
Yep.
And then with all the new ones, honestly, I just can't keep up. And I'm not a huge science fiction person. I've read, Discworld and so Terry Pratchett, and I'm trying to think what the other one was. The where 42 is the answer, the ultimate answer to the ultimate question. Hitchhiker's Guide.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's like I've read those and stuff, but I'm not like actively seeking those things out. So I'm just overwhelmed with all the Star Wars stuff now. And
crazy,
that's not, if I was working on something that was it, I would know it backwards and forwards, but I'm okay with not.
No, fair enough. You're credited on the special editions of the Monkey Island games, Tami. I wasn't sure if you worked on those, or just because you worked on the originals that they put your name on there. Are you happy to fill us in?
Yeah, they were just kind enough to include us. So it was really nice.
Yeah. No, rightfully so. But okay, fair enough. No, good stuff. I've got, it's quite a tough question, and I'd love to, we're quite a light-hearted podcast, but I'd love to hear your view on this, because it is a I think it is a problem in the industry, and the game industry even today is still mainly a male-oriented profession. Obviously, as a woman, did you ever find it harder to move up the ladder? Did you ever feel any discrimination at all? I know it's a bit of a sensitive question, but I'd love to ask you if you have to talk about it.
I appreciate the question. It's a good question, and one that I wish that more people would ask, and that more companies would make changes based on. I was lucky. I was really lucky to have Ron. He wasn't my hire fire manager at Lucasfilm, but he was at Humongous. Lucasfilm, I probably wouldn't have become a project lead, because there were people who were senior to me. So when we got to Humongous, Ron looked at my strengths and my skills and decided that I should be a lead and designing my own games. So that was just really fortunate for me. But, I don't think it's common in this industry for women to be looked at that way. I at times read threads that are appalling about things that go on. But some, in terms of like things that should and could change, I think the first one is looking, and this is for the industry, not for consumers, but in the industry, looking at women not as objects, not as sex symbols or fresh meat. Like I once got an invitation to date somebody in a test plan. It was just written in there, and I was reviewing it, and I was like, nope.
Wow.
Yeah, and not looking at us as oddities. It's just, let us just be normal people. I think part of it is also the language we use. Not calling women girls. I'm not a girl. I'm a grown adult, so I'm a woman. If I call myself a girl, that is very different. But I am a woman, and so are the other women in the industry. Yeah. Also, not using the word female as a noun. Female as a noun is used in laboratories. It's used to depict plants and animals, and a scientist will say, "Well, this female specimen," and that's not me. I'm a woman, and so using female as an adjective, just like you would use male. So, I am a female programmer. That said, I wish that the industry didn't call out female programmers.
Yeah.
I'm just a programmer.
Yeah.
Why? Because we don't call male programmers a male programmer. We call them programmer. So it would be nice to just say programmer, say artist, say designer, whatever, and then use the proper pronouns for whatever that person prefers. I think also creating, it's kind of one of those, you have to build it to bring them in. And so creating more games that appeal to women and also to gender neutral, because I think we're also missing gender neutral, which doesn't necessarily mean pink. Like, stop with the pink, but it's just, there's not a lot that I personally am interested in playing, in mass market games.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. It's like, why would I go into games if I'm not a gamer? And so there's that. Now, I do think I want to give credit to the people making games for children and for tweens. I think things like Nintendo titles and Lego games and Minecraft, like, they get everybody.
Yeah.
They have figured it out how to get all genders. But I think as the kids turn into teens, a young woman, she doesn't necessarily want to play a shooter. And so, or even a strategy game, maybe that's not necessarily the way that women think. I mean, we are strategic, don't get me wrong, but a strategy game, there are women, and there are women who do, and there are groups of women who are gamer women, and that's a really cool thing. But I think it's not out there. And then I think the last thing is coming up with characters that women can really grab onto. Yeah. But also that men can grab onto. So basically creating a character description first, and then rolling the dice to decide what gender that character should be. Yeah. And don't change it based on that. Like my first experience when I made Freddy Fish was Freddy was actually written as a boy. And when I came on the project, I was like, we have no female leads. So we need, the only female lead we had was in Fatty Bear. He was making a birthday party for the little girl that he belonged to.
Right.
And she was asleep the entire game. So she wasn't really a lead. So, I was like, we need a female lead. And so I asked Ron, could I change this to a girl? And he agreed. And so I went to the writer of our script and I said, I want you to change everything in the script so that all the he's are she's and the hims are hers. And that's it. And I got back a script and she was wearing lipstick and carrying a little shell purse that she dropped. And then doing a loop-de-loop was too hard for her. And I went back to the writer and I was like, 100% no. Like, I want the exact same script, except hims to hers. And, I was like, it just changed these pronouns. Like, it's just not that difficult. Yeah. And so he did. And that was what we used. But it was just so amazing to me that that's just not how people look at it and how they think about it. But just, create gender neutral characters and see how it goes.
Thank you. No, Tami, brilliant. Completely agree. Everything you said, by the way. Again, a bit of a personal question here, but why did you leave the video game industry? And what projects are you currently working on right now? Don't mind me asking.
I left. Well, I went to toys. I left to go to toys initially. And so I worked at Fisher-Price and I helped them with electronic learning toys. I worked on the content for that. And that was actually where Dave Grossman and Casey Ackley helped with the scripts and such. And then when I came back from working there, I got kind of burned out. I came back, I worked in other parts of the industry. I did a little bit of casual games. But as I was an external person from the team, and I realized I really much prefer to be on the team. Then I did a gig at Dreambox Learning, which made an online learning system. I worked on their K-2 math. And I have to say, I didn't know anything about new math when I got there. And oh my gosh, it makes it so much easier. So it's really cool. But when that finished, I wanted to stay in Seattle and I was looking around at the different companies and there wasn't a lot in children's stuff at that time. And the stuff that was there was licensed.
Right, yeah.
And I can do licensed work. I've done a lot of licensed work, but it's not really the thing that gets my heart pounding and, my mind racing and like, oh, we could do this. And so it just really wasn't something that I wanted to do. And then I also didn't really want to do the grown-up games. I really, really enjoyed the kids stuff. So I thought, well, let me see about doing something else. So I moved into social media analytics.
Wow.
And it sounds really different, but I was writing code, or am writing code. It uses natural language processing. So the code, basically looking for how people talk on the internet. And so I'm using like real language and trying to figure out, well, if this word is close to that word, then they, I was doing some work for Microsoft and they want to know how their products are doing, whether products are named things like Word and Excel.
Trusted.
So you can't just scrape the internet for every time those words come up. You have to try to figure out, how do people talk about it? Well, if they talk about Microsoft or MSFT, and then it's really near to where they talk about Word, they're probably talking about Word. And, there's a whole bunch of strategies that I had to come up with to figure out how to get at these oddly named products. And then also like how they wanted to know, well, do people think our products are good? And what do they like best about it? I had to come up with strategies to use the English language to find out how people are really talking about it, good, bad, indifferent, whatnot, and then against their competitors. So I was still coding. And then from the results, I still had to make a report, which is basically like telling a story. Because if you just throw a bunch of graphics with numbers on it, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. And so you have to pull out these nuggets and kind of build a story around it so that they can actually grasp it better and figure out what to do about it.
That's incredible. Wow, that's an incredible. So you're still in the video game, still in the computer industry, obviously, but just away from games. But that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I've got two final questions, Tami, and I really appreciate your time today. What out of all the have you got 3 best video games of all time? Basically, it's a tough question. Do you play a lot of video games?
I play games on my phone. I don't play a lot on my computer. I do simple, casual games that I can just do quickly. They keep my mind active and such like that. I knew you were going to ask these questions, this one and the next one. So I've thought about it long and hard, and I was like, I think my top video games of all time, Tetris.
Classic. Which
Ron and I actually used to play against each other while we were working on Monkey 2.
Oh, wow.
We had 2 computers and an extra screen, a monochrome screen. So we had three monitors sitting in front of us while we were programming. We had a Mac, a PC, and then this monochrome for debugging. The Mac is where we played. And basically, he had found a Tetris game that you could set which number of the game, which version of the game you were playing. Not really version, which iteration of the game. So it was, we would both be playing the same Tetris where the same pieces fell, but we weren't playing at the same time because this was before stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So we'd both be playing, game number 1051. And we would then compare our scores. And he kept winning over and over and over. And I was like, wow, how are you so good at this? I love puzzle games, and I think I'm actually pretty good. It turned out he was cheating. He had this game if you had your cursor in a certain spot, it would put a single pixel in the corner of the screen. And that told you were right. And so he was using this cheat to get the pieces in all the best places.
That is so funny.
Yeah. So after that, we changed to a different game or something. I don't remember exactly what we did, but I think we changed to Spider Solitaire. Right, yeah. But yeah, so it was that's my little Tetris story. Sudoku is the game that I literally play every day. I play it every night before I go to sleep. Tetris is puzzles, it's visual puzzles. Sudoku is also puzzles. It's just, but they're pattern puzzles.
Yeah.
I like puzzles. I think, like match 3 games and stuff like that. But my third top game of all time, I think, is Pong.
Ah, classic, yeah.
And I chose it because it's simple and it's entertaining for somebody who doesn't necessarily know that there are, much greater graphics out there. But, considering the time, it was a game that started everything.
Yeah.
And I think it gave us a lot of lessons about what is appealing and what people want to do with their time. So, yeah, I guess those are my top three: Tetris, Sudoku, and Pong.
Good choices. No, thank you.
Thanks.
We ask all our guests this, Tami. It's a bit of a random question, but if you could share a few drinks with any video game character across any game, could be one you worked on, doesn't have to be, who would you choose and why?
I have three for this too. Is that okay?
Right, let's do it.
Okay. I have one finalist, but my runners up are Lara Croft.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think talking with her over drinks about her travels and adventures would be really interesting. Chun-Li from Street Fighter.
Very good.
Because she just kicks ass.
Yeah.
I mean, she's pretty awesome. And I think she would have some really interesting stories about the people she's beaten. And she, talking about the industry and women in the industry, she doesn't put up with guff. So she's kind of one of my heroes. But I think the character I would really want to go sit down and have drinks with when he came of age would be Luther from the Freddy Fish games.
Ah, okay.
Because he's goofy and he's funny and he gets into a little trouble. But he's also just friendly and kind.
Yeah.
And the voice actor for him is a good friend of mine. So that also helps. but he is also just friendly and kind and just, I think ultimately that's what I would want in a drinking partner.
Bless you. Three amazing answers. I've really enjoyed today, Tami. I really mean that. I've really enjoyed our chat. I think it's been, I really appreciate you being so honest and just sharing some amazing stories, which I think that maybe haven't been heard before or in the public domain. So really do appreciate your time. I honestly mean it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you listening and the audience as well.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it. You can tweet us at Arcade Attack UK. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Arcade Attack UK. Check out our website at arcadeattack.co.uk for lots more retro gaming goodness and to delve into our archives. Our podcasts are also available on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review and a rating, we'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to support Arcade Attack, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/arcadeattack, which will give you access to exclusive podcasts, interviews and other bonus content. So, until next time, take care and we'll speak to you soon.